I'm probably gonna get a lot of flack for this, but it's also gonna be a low-key rant about Pokemon and why I consider it pretty overrated. I'm just gonna get the harsh reality out there. Game Freak is what Pokemon is as to what EA is for sports games. I'm not even kidding. And people are somehow fine with this despite each and every single Pokemon game being pretty much the exact same and having pretty much the exact same formula. Play as a trainer, then you get 8 gym badges, fight in opposing forests, and in some games, after getting all 8 badges, you capture a god Pokemon and that's it. How the fuck is this not given the same flack as a sports game made by EA? I get that Pokemon is a really well-liked series, particularly with the anime, the card games, the manga, the movies. No, not that one, and the dub is fucking terrible. That one's fine though. Why do people like Pokemon so much? And why are they so hostile towards each other when it's literally the same games each and every time? You cannot tell me otherwise. I can understand that the games were limited back in the Game Boy, and particularly with the very first entry, there was like 4 total versions, which is a little extreme. You have Pokemon Red and Blue, then in Japan you had Green, and then they released Yellow, which was more or less a tie-in to the anime. So that's a second revision of a game that already had 2 different releases. I'm gonna be honest. Before the prices of retro games came up, the only Pokemon games I truly give a shit about are Pokemon Yellow, Crystal, and Platinum. All on the original cartridge, even before I got the flash cards that I mentioned earlier. Because despite those being more or less updates to the games from before, it is at least the definitive edition that has the most content, and you have one based on the older anime, which I actually like, before they introduced May, Max, and fucking Dawn. And of course, you have Pokemon Platinum, which also has the content that wasn't even brought back in the remake, made by people who weren't made by Game Freak, but yet chose to release the 2 games anyway. So why exactly do I hate Pokemon, besides it being probably the most overrated gaming series, probably even more so than Xenoblade Chronicles and Fire Emblem, yet those 2 are going on it like nobody's business, kind of like with the Mario and Zelda fan. 2 games to the price of 1. There are a bunch of other games that I do like, that sadly fall for this trope. Basically, if you don't know what this trope is, I'll explain it. You essentially have to buy 2 different versions of the same game, but having different levels separated between the 2, despite the fact that Pokemon could very well have done this shit by the time the Game Boy Advance came out. Sure, the games are pretty much the same. They have different backgrounds. You know, the locations are slightly different. There might be 1 or 2 different changes in the story. But what the fuck is the point of this? Can you imagine if games did this shit today? Let's look at something like Call of Duty 4, okay? You have the Rangers and the SAS. If I mispronounce those, forgive me. Can you imagine if whoever the fuck makes these COD games now release their campaigns, but release them based on the faction you play as? You have Call of Duty 4 Special Rangers, and then you have Call of Duty 4 SAS. You're still playing the same game. It has the exact same mechanics, except the campaign levels are split between 2 games that are full price. This is retarded. Why do people like this idea of a concept? It is seriously fucking stupid that people are essentially expected to pay $120 for pretty much the same game, repackaged, but with some shit twisted around for the sake of trading. I don't want to hear that trading excuse anymore. You can literally trade on the online service they have now. I think it's been a thing since the Pokemon games on the DS, because those systems were the first to incorporate online functionality. So what is the point of releasing these games separately? To keep it authentic? Even the 3DS games did this. And as shitty as the 3DS was, at least they had all the Pokemon, which is the whole point of Pokemon gotta catch them all. But yet these fucking people actually want to get on other people's cases and say that it's a good thing that they're cutting back on the Pokemon you can capture, because the poor Switch can't handle like 800 plus Pokemon when the whole tagline of the fucking series is to catch them all. What the fuck? The Switch can't handle 800 plus Pokemon? Well, what the fuck is The Witcher 3 then? Or as much as I'm gonna fucking say this, Doom Eternal. You mean to tell me that Game Freak cannot optimize their games to have 800 plus Pokemon? That is a load of shit. That just sounds like Game Freak being lazy, despite the fact that people have found actual evidence that says that they're reused assets. Whenever they reuse assets or not, doesn't excuse the fact that the whole tagline of the fucking series is to catch them all, and yet they cut back on Pokemon. I don't care who was cut, I don't care who got in. You should not buy a Pokemon game where it does not have every Pokemon. This isn't fucking Virtua Fighter or Tekken or any fucking fighting game out there where the story changes and that they have to change the roster of the characters. It is a video game built on the sole foundation of catching Pokemon, filling a national Pokedex, and people are somehow fine with this because they're bound by nostalgia but get pissed at me because I have a couple criticisms with these games. I do not want to hear shit when I bring up the ROM hack debacle because people say, you can't factor in ROM hacks because that's not made by the company. I have seen ROM hacks of Pokemon Crystal that has all the Pokemon in there, and I'm very damn sure you can even play it on real hardware if you could. If fans can make all the Pokemon catchable without needing to rely on trading, then fucking Nintendo or Game Freak should be able to do this and not have these two releases shit anymore. The Switch is pretty decent for what games Nintendo themselves put out there. They should not have to keep doing this just for the sake of authenticity. These games are clearly powerful enough, and yet Nintendo and Game Freak, I'm putting the blame on both honestly, are just as persistent as making people pay $120 for games that may as well be won at this point, because considering online trading is pretty much a thing, I don't think people are going to run around in modern times running around on Switches and using wires or whatever Wi-Fi bullshit just to get a Pokemon that can catch easily. It's bullshit. And don't try to tell me that, you know, it's whatever people can pick when they have little bundles of having the two games. That is bullshit, and do not try to fucking white knight for them. I'm going to close my rant with this. One such reason why I enjoy Metal Walker despite its one save per cartridge and the gameplay being not up to everyone's cup of tea is that games like Metal Walker do have a decent solution despite only needing to pay for the game once. Having a different fucking campaign depending on what communicator you get. The brown one or the green one. That's it. I know people would say, oh, you could have a different save slot, but Pokemon doesn't do this, so why does Metal Walker get shit for it? I know that in Metal Walker, the only real differences is the enemies you fight, especially with the bosses, but at least it's a decent way for people to get more or less on what enemies to fight and such stuff, and you're not forced to buy a second version of Metal Walker where you're playing literally the exact same game, except you're fighting slightly different enemies. Why do people defend Pokemon so fucking hard when it is, once again, Game Freak is what Pokemon is as to what EA is for sports games. Metal Walker, despite not being the greatest Game Boy Color game and actually being pretty hard for its own good, does offer a alternative that pretty much should hopefully fulfill the best of both worlds. And if you really want to be fussy about it, play the game more than once, but play it on emulator so you can have a different save file for it. And if you want to try to use emulation as an argument, how many times did you play Pokemon in the same save? My thoughts exactly. I apologize if I sound a little negative in this section of the rant, but that's what happens when I talk about Pokemon. I can never talk about Pokemon unless I talk about the two releases bullshit, which I immensely disagree with. It also doesn't help that after Pokemon Platinum, there was hardly a revision of Pokemon games that essentially added extra content that was definitive. And even when something like Diamond and Pearl got remade, they never bothered to add in the content that actually was decent in Platinum. Are you fucking kidding me? One more thing I want to mention with Pokemon actually before I do close this rant. How come none of the other Pokemon games do this bullshit? You have Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2, Pokken Tournament, XD Gale of Darkness, and almost every other Pokemon spin-off except for the dungeon games. Every damn core Pokemon game is 2 releases. Why? I don't care that it's just what Pokemon does, bro. Get over it. If this would happen to any other fucking game, people would be pissed off. I don't have anything else to say. I really want to play these Mega Man Battle Network games. but I'll just probably stick to the GBA releases, especially if the releases on modern systems end up sucking. And I'm also wouldn't be surprised if they remove the ability to make save states, kind of like in the Mega Man X collection, because of the chip trading mechanics. I'm actually very interested how they will implement online play, but wait. They're not implementing rollback netcode. Oh god. Oh fuck. We're all fucked, guys. Capcom didn't redeem themselves. But wait, they're making Street Fighter 6, and that's gonna have fucking rollback netcode, guys. So the game's gonna be great, despite Street Fighter 5 being one of the worst fucking fighting games that Capcom's ever put out, besides...